case of Kaye Mandatti. Kaye Anita Mandatti was born on August 26, 1998, in Webster to T.A.C. Mandatti and Allison Steele. The family was well off, with Allison being a scientist and T.A.C. working as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. After her parents divorced, Allison remarried NASA engineer Lawrence Butin, who lived in Houston. Despite her parents' separation, Kaye maintained a strong relationship with her father, regularly communicating with him. Her stepfather also adored Kaye and became like a second dad to her. Kaye was not only a grateful and loving daughter and granddaughter, but also an excellent student, team member, sister, and friend, known for her infectious laughter and kind heart that could light up any room. Kaye excelled academically and was actively involved in various extracurricular activities in school, including horseback riding, piano playing, and theater performances. She was also a dedicated Girl Scout and enjoyed spending time with her friends and family, whether it was hiking with her parents or running around the neighborhood. After graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas in 2016, Kaye went on to study communications at Trinity University in San Antonio. With her dark hair and radiant beauty, she quickly became popular among her peers. Leading the football team's cheerleading squad and making many friends, Kaye was always eager to try new and exciting things, from exploring uncharted territories to participating in extreme sports. Her love for animals led her to volunteer with an animal therapy group, where she found joy in helping others. During a football game, Kaye met Mark Houghton, a 22-year-old athlete and professional baseball player. At first, she didn't notice him as she was already smitten with someone else. However, Mark was immediately captivated by her charisma and striking features, particularly her large black eyes. Mark and Kaye's first two meetings didn't go smoothly, but Mark didn't give up. By September 2017, they had officially started dating. From the start, their friends and acquaintances thought they were a mismatched pair because they were both emotional and had short tempers. Their relationship was lacking in compromise and was characterized by heated arguments and confrontations from the beginning. The young couple's passion often turned to jealousy, leading to frequent quarrels. Friends who witnessed their relationship reported that Kaye often had bruises on her arms and legs. A close friend shared a particularly disturbing incident, in which Kaye was too afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark and asked the friend to do it for her. Things eventually escalated to a frightening point where Mark became aggressive, threatened violence, and even pulled out a gun. Kaye was aware that her boyfriend Mark had a jealous temper, and their loud arguments were frequent. Although she never wanted their fights to be public knowledge, she acknowledged that she wasn't blameless in their disputes. However, on September 24, 2017, her roommates intervened, calling the police around 1 a.m. after hearing loud noises and Mark yelling threats from Kaye's room. When the police arrived, they found Mark alone in the room. Kaye refused to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Nevertheless, her friends suspected that Mark's anger issues were fueled by substance abuse and reported his violent threats, including an incident where he threatened to throw Kaye off a balcony. Despite their tumultuous relationship, Mark and Kaye had moments of deep love and affection. However, their bliss was short-lived, as their argument at the Malaluna Music Festival in San Antonio on October 29th, triggered by the unexpected appearance of Kaye's ex-boyfriend, demonstrated. The fight was so intense that they left the festival early. Mark's black Mercedes arrived at a hospital 6 hours after their friends last saw them. He rushed out of the car, frantically waving and calling for help. In the front seat, medical staff found an unconscious, semi-nude girl. The car was in disarray, with Kaye's clothes scattered around. She was slumped forward, resembling a lifeless doll. The medical staff rushed Kaye to the emergency room on a stretcher. Mark told them they had taken illegal substances before attending the festival, which helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. She was later transferred to a medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse specializing in intimate assault cases examined her and found additional bruises on her arms, legs, and ear. The autopsy revealed that Kaye died from blunt force trauma to her face and head, indicating she was a victim of a deadly attack. The police then launched an investigation to find her killer. Mark became the main suspect since he was the last person seen with Kaye that night. Although there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Mark's behavior during police interviews raised suspicions. He changed his story multiple times, contradicting his initial account. Surveillance footage also showed him and Kaye at locations he had previously denied being at. Additionally, interviews with Kaylee's friends and family revealed a history of aggressive behavior towards her, with one of her sisters even admitting to being terrified of him. Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, has filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, accusing the institution of failing to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also names Mark Houghton as a defendant. It claims that Mark's assault led to Kaylee's death, motivated by jealousy. The lawsuit alleges that Trinity University's staff, administration, and campus police were aware of Mark's erratic behavior during his relationship with Kaye. Despite this, the university took no action to protect Kaye in the weeks leading up to her death, even though Mark had threatened to break her face or cause her serious harm. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit's allegations, citing the ongoing legal process. Mark was banned from campus for a year due to an incident in his dorm room, but he repeatedly violated the ban. During investigations, it was discovered that Mark had a history of violent behavior towards his girlfriend, Kaye, including threatening to harm her sisters and others. Her sisters reported that Mark had threatened to throw one sister off a balcony and shoot her ex-boyfriend's brothers. Mark had an arrest warrant issued against him, and he surrendered in February 2018. He faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction, but pleaded not guilty. The trial regarding Kaye Mandatti's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark's volatile temper led him to fatally assault Kaye, in a fit of rage, causing her severe injuries. They claimed that Mark then waited 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. Mark's defense team suggested that Kaylee's death might have been caused by factors other than Mark's, such as the banned substances found in her system, which could have led to a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described her daughter's injuries as extremely severe, comparable to those sustained from a fall from an airplane. The injuries covered her entire body, from her head to her toes, including bruises, red marks, and scratches. The only areas that were not injured were her back and the back of her legs. Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who performed Kaylee's autopsy, presented graphic evidence, including photographs of the victim's injuries. These images revealed a subdural hematoma, type of bleeding in the brain typically associated with traumatic brain injury on the right side of Kaylee's brain. Dr. Dana testified that Kaye suffered severe cranial and facial injuries, including a dent in her skull and extensive bruising and trauma to her face. She also found bruises on Kaylee's eyelids, jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks, as well as hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. William Anderson disagreed with Dr. Dana's conclusion, stating that the autopsy results were inconsistent with the idea that Kaye was attacked. Instead, he believed that Kaylee's injuries were more likely caused by a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter argued that the prosecution lacked concrete evidence to explain what happened to Kaye on the night in question, and that it was impossible to prove Mark's involvement. He highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her prior treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Jason Wallach, a professor, testified that Kaylee's blood contained a high level of MDMA, also known as ecstasy or mol, on the evening of October 29, 2017. The concentration of MDMA in her blood suggested that she could have suffered a minor head injury, which could then be exacerbated by the drug into a life-threatening condition. John Hunter suggested that a drug can affect individuals differently, leading to varying physical reactions, such as increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalance, which can cause loss of consciousness. During the trial, Mark Houghton testified that he and Kaye Mandatti had an argument and engaged in intimate relations in the car before she passed out. He claimed that their intimacy was consensual and involved rough sex, which included strangling her at her request. However, the origin of the bruises on Kaylee's body remained unclear. Kaylee's mother, Allison, was convinced that Mark Houghton was responsible for her daughter's death. Despite being charged with her murder, Mark Houghton maintained his innocence during the 2019 trial. The defense argued that Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff during resuscitation efforts, which led to a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. The case was presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline in the 144th District Court. Following the mistrial, Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez expressed disappointment and announced that he would review the case. Kaylee's parents decided to conduct their own investigation, focusing on a small bruise near Kaylee's ear. They believe that Mark Houghton might have hit her head against the car window, causing the bruise. Kaylee's parents collected evidence, including autopsy reports and photos, and obtained 3 affidavits under oath. This led to Mark Houghton's arrest on charges of aggravated intimate assault and criminal mischief. The timeline of events presented in the investigation highlighted Mark Houghton's alleged lies and the evidence that led to his arrest. During the trial, the prosecutors portrayed Mark Houghton as a manipulative and controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee and took her phone away. 2 weeks before her death, Mark Houghton pushed Kaylee against a brick wall and trashed her dorm room. Kaylee then asked for space, and Mark Houghton began sending her dozens of messages, threatening to end his life. The couple attended a festival where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Houghton then took Kaylee to a deserted parking lot, where they stayed for over an hour. Prosecutors suggested that it was there that Mark Houghton attacked and killed Kaylee. Kaylee's family thanked the Texas Rangers for their work in bringing criminal charges against Mark Houghton. The prosecution considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents, but ultimately withdrew it due to potential complications. Mark Houghton was convicted of aggravated assault causing harm that led to the death of Kaye Mandatti. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison with a $110,000 fine and restitution to Kaylee's family. He was also barred from contacting over 20 individuals involved in the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in Wilkes County Jail, eligible for parole in 2033. Although the conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, they felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution presented a more comprehensive case against Mark, but the family was still dissatisfied with the outcome and sought a retrial. Kaylee's tragic story highlights the devastating impact of violence on young people and her family's quest for justice. Despite the conviction, Kaylee's family felt that the verdict did not serve justice for their daughter. In 2019, Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, successfully lobbied the Texas legislature to expand the missing persons alert system in Texas. She also founded the nonprofit organization, Kayle's Calling, aiming to consolidate missing persons alert systems. Additionally, she established a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing public information about the Clear Alert, an emergency broadcasting alert in Texas for individuals aged 18 to 64. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed that none of Kaylee's guardians were informed that Mark Houghton had trashed her dorm room, giving him continuous access to her, and making her vulnerable to manipulation. Despite being acquitted of the charge of ending a life, Mark was found guilty of aggravated assault, causing bodily harm. The family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, feeling relief that the legal proceedings had concluded, allowing them to begin the healing process. Losing a child is an agonizing ordeal, and sadly, it was a heart-wrenching journey that Kaylee's parents had to endure. Allison said they are still completely devastated by the loss of Kaye, and asked those of faith to pray for her family, friends, and for justice in this matter. On June 5, 2000, at 1 p.m., Sharon Anettz, a 54-year-old woman, was shot and killed at the John Butler Dry Cleaners on Isley Bridge Road. Additionally, there were no arrests made for an extended period of time, which caused complete panic in the neighborhood. The culprit remained unidentified for more than 20 years, but the investigation was revived in 2022 by a reconstituted cold case unit. A team of meticulous investigators and forensic specialists worked to unearth the long-hidden truth. They carefully re-interviewed both new and old witnesses and assessed forensic data. After 20 years, the murderer was finally apprehended. How did that fateful night's events transpire? Why did the investigators decide to reopen this long-closed case in the eyes of the justice system? Greenville County, South Carolina is a bustling and populous area. More people live there than in any other county in the state. The county seat, where important decisions are made, is located in Greenville. What distinguishes Greenville County is its emphasis on education. Greenville County is the largest school district in South Carolina. Students learn, develop, and make plans for the future here. Greenville County is more than just choices and schools. Another attraction is the natural beauty, which includes peaceful landscapes and undulating hills. This place has a very welcoming community. Tragedies, though, can happen even in this peaceful paradise. The unsolved case of Sharon Anettz, which persisted for almost 20 years, left a lasting impression on the town. Saw the birth of Sharon Anettz, daughter of Leslie Franklin Kellogg and Leona Rosetta Skester Prince. Sharon developed into a strong, driven adult. She brought warmth and a work ethic that was characteristic of the Midwest. Having grown up in northern Michigan, alongside her sisters, Sharon Anettz grew up in Michigan. She also grew up alongside her brothers. She inherited kindness and a desire to make the world a better place from her early years. At exactly 21 years old, on July 12, 1966, she gave birth to a son named Frank. Public access to her and her son's relationship is currently restricted. Sharon relocated to Greenville, South Carolina, in her mid-40s, where she established herself and had additional children. She also had 2 other sons, Walter and Michael, and a daughter, Christina. She was employed at the John Butler Dry Cleaners on Easley Bridge Road, which would subsequently serve as the scene of a tragic incident. Locals knew the small dry cleaners on Easley Bridge Road. Neighbors chatted while dropping off for picking up their laundry at this communal hub. 54 years old Sharon Anettz, the woman in charge of this dry cleaning establishment, was well known for her diligence and congenial demeanor. She was a beloved member of the Greenville community, having grown up in Michigan. Sadly, on June 5, 2000, Sharon was shot and killed during a robbery at her dry cleaning. Greenville County was forever altered by this tragedy. The killer of Sharon remained a mystery for more than 20 years. The quiet upstate town of Greenville, South Carolina, was horrified to learn of Sharon's horrific murder. On June 5, 2000, during the late summer twilight, dry cleaners were getting ready to close as the sun was setting, creating long shadows on the empty streets. Sharon arranged the counter as usual. She had no idea it would get dark on this typical evening. Among the friends and regulars that evening was an unexpected presence. A certain 44-year-old man had visited the dry cleaners. He occasionally performed strange tasks around the store, such as emptying the trash. His intentions on this fateful evening were, however, not pure. This man was going to rob the dry cleaners. He watched the company's activities in silence, waiting for the ideal moment to strike. With every task he completed in the days preceding the crime, he got closer to his malevolent objective. On the evening of June 5, 2000, he suddenly made contact with Sharon with malicious intent. Sharon stood up for herself and her dry cleaning company during a terrible ordeal. There was a gunshot at the end of the conflict that reverberated throughout the community for years. That fateful night, silence was shattered by a gunshot. The beautiful Sharon Anettz was killed by a senseless act of violence. Her life of kindness and hard work came to an abrupt end when she was shot in the back. As the gunshot faded, the gravity of the situation hit home. Once the killer realized how serious his act was, he left shock, terror, and sadness in his wake. Tragically killed in a place where she had brought so much jewelry, Sharon lay behind the counter in the pool of her own blood. The neighborhood was shocked by the tragedy that night. At 1:30 p.m., a customer discovered her dead and called 911. The dry cleaners, which was once a cozy and welcoming place, turned into a somber reminder of the darkness that can be found anywhere. Sharon's work ethic and steadfastness were deeply mourned by her colleagues, friends, and family. While the murderer was at large, local authorities began a vigorous investigation. They wished to stop such a horrible act from occurring in their neighborhood, send Sharon's assailant to prison, and provide closure to her bereaved family. Despite their best efforts, the murder investigation into Sharon Anettz stalled. In the dark, the killer had eluded capture. Following the disaster at John Butler Dry Cleaners in June 2000, Greenville County was in disbelief following the murder of the community's beloved Sharon Anettz. Justice had to be served. The early investigation into this horrific murder demonstrated the resolve of law enforcement, as well as the community's optimistic quest for answers. When first responders arrived, the investigation started. The offender was the subject of an instant manhunt by the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. A thorough search of the crime scene was conducted for evidence, and witnesses who lived nearby were questioned. It was clear from the beginning that solving this case would require unwavering perseverance. One of the detective's biggest problems early on in the case was the absence of a suspect. With minimal evidence, Sharon was killed in the shadows. Still, the investigation was shaped by the possibility of a robbery. According to early witness accounts, the intruder intended to loot the dry cleaners. It seemed as though Sharon Anettz had been violently robbed while attempting to defend her business. As investigators tried to find the person responsible for this horrific act of violence, this information further complicated the case. It was necessary to gather and analyze copious amounts of evidence for the initial inquiry. Every square inch of the crime scene was examined in search of hints about the perpetrator. Investigators looked for physical evidence that might provide a breakthrough, such as DNA and fingerprints. Questions were asked of witnesses at the dry cleaners. Their crucial testimony provided important details about the pre- and post-crime activities. They described the events of that night, including Sharon Anettz's terrifying encounter with her attacker. Sharon Anettz, who touched many lives, was mourned in Greenville County while law enforcement conducted an investigation. Her co-workers, friends, and family were in mourning. The community stood by Sharon's family during the investigation and promised to pursue justice. The outcome of the case depended on their determination. As leads dwindled and witnesses grew more elusive, the case stagnated. Sharon's loved ones remembered her, but her killer remained a mystery. The case was eventually filed under cold case. Leads dried up, witnesses moved on, and the trail of the criminal became more bleak every day. The prolonged investigation caused suffering for Sharon's friends, family, and community. This terrible crime's perpetrator was unknown for more than 20 years. Victim Sharon Anettz continues to exist. She was a representation of strength and hope. It was hope that justice would triumph and the truth would come to light. For more than 20 years, Greenville County, South Carolina was plagued by her cold case. A renewed quest for justice in the summer of 2022 brought this long-dormant investigation back to life. The tipping point was the new cold case unit of the Greenville County Sheriff's Office, which debuted in the summer of 2022. Sheriff Lewis established a specialized unit in 2020 to look into cases that remain unsolved, such as the Sharon Anettz cold case. His objectives were to resurrect past investigations, assess the evidence, speak with witnesses again, and employ fresh techniques. The pursuit of justice for victims of unsolved crimes was revitalized by this cold case unit. The community was assured that every case would be taken seriously and that no effort would be spared. The Sharon Anettz cold case reinvestigation started by detectives reaching out to witnesses of the June 2000 incident at the dry cleaners in an attempt to gather information. They confronted witnesses whose memories had faded. Regardless, reconstructing the crime and the attacker's actions required careful consideration of their testimonies. These extra interviews shed light on the events of that evening. The murderer's meeting of Sharon Anettz was revealed by witnesses. Their memories, though fading, were essential to solving the mystery. Technology and forensic evidence were scarce early in the case, but over time, forensic science developed. This gave the reinvestigation team the opportunity to assess the evidence with state-of-the-art techniques. Forensic specialists meticulously examined crime scene material using modern methodologies in order to uncover new information. Ballistic testing and DNA fingerprinting were repeated. Although exhausting, it resulted in a breakthrough. Old clues were re-examined and new leads surfaced as the investigation went on. Witnesses who were interviewed again disclosed the attackers' goals. The horrifying events that transpired at the dry cleaners were re-examined and determined to be an attempted robbery gone wrong. Investigators also looked into the connections of Roger Keith Hudgens, the key suspect who died in 2008. Hudgens was a neighbor of the dry cleaners. Witness accounts and his connections within the establishment shed light on the murderer's activities. The breakthrough in the Sharon Anettz cold case was the result of diligent work, fresh interviews, and advanced forensic analysis. Investigators determined that Sharon Anettz was killed by 44-year-old Roger Keith Hudgens at the beginning of January 2023. Testimonies from witnesses and forensic evidence shed light on that fatal evening. Horrible things happened as a result of Hudgens' plan to rob the dry cleaners. In the Sharon Anettz cold case, no one was taken into custody despite this effort. Hudgens is the culprit, the investigators concluded, but he passed away in 2008. It provided closure to the victim's family and addressed inquiries from the community. The crime and its aftermath will always be associated with Hudgens, even though he was never charged with it. The case was resolved after years of investigation, law enforcement, and community commitment to the truth. The story demonstrates that a community can crack even the most challenging cold case, even though no one was arrested. Greenville County was prepared for the Sharon Anettz cold case trial after 20 years of uncertainty. Justice had produced findings that would go to trial. This trial would prove law enforcement's and the community's commitment to justice, as well as provide closure for the betrayed. Roger Keith Hudgens, the main suspect, went on trial even in death. His actions on that fateful day in June 2000 were gaining legal attention, even after he passed away in 2008. The personnel at the dry cleaners knew Hudgens, a local, from Sharon Anett's tragic robbery. Witness accounts and forensic evidence would be used by the prosecution to discredit Hudgens. As the trial started, the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecution meticulously gathered testimony from witnesses about that terrible night. They gave a detailed account of Hudgens and Sharon Anett's meeting prior to the crime. The forensic evidence that was re-examined was crucial to the case. Experts in ballistics attested that Hudgens' weapon was used in the killing. His DNA was found at the crime scene, which provided strong evidence in his criminal case. To undermine the prosecution, the defense made a move. They questioned witness accounts, saying that memories had become hazy with time. To cast doubt, they also questioned the chain of custody for the evidence. For justice and closure, Sharon Anett's friends, family, and co-workers were present. Weeks of court cases, talks, and introspection led up to the moment of truth. The jury unanimously found Roger Keith Hudgens guilty of killing Sharon Anettz. The verdict that provided closure to Sharon's family and confirmed the community's and law enforcement's commitment to justice reverberated throughout the courtroom. Despite his passing, Hudgens will always be associated with the senseless crime that left the town scarred. Roger Keith Hudgens was found guilty and his sentencing commenced. A sentence that was appropriate for the crime was what the prosecution sought. The defense, on the other hand, asked for mercy, pointing to Hudgens' innocence and lack of criminal history. The trial came to an end when Hudgens was found guilty of the tragedy that occurred that evening. The sentence's symbolic meaning conveys a strong message of justice. The Sharon Anettz cold case trial served as a tribute to the perseverance of a community in cracking a cold case. It demonstrated the resilience of justice and truth. Some criminals leave an indelible mark on the people they wronged. Roger Keith Hudgens' life was connected to Greenville County's most horrifying incident in the Sharon Anettz cold case. Roger Keith Hudgens was familiar with Greenville County. Hudgens' birth date is September 13, 1955. He had a good local reputation. He was well known for frequenting the dry cleaners, where the old case started. Hudgens performed strange jobs at the dry cleaners over the years. Every now and then, he removed the trash. On February 17, 2008, Roger Keith Hudgens passed away. He passed away due to medical issues. Any legal action against him was terminated by his death because he would never face justice. His name was still connected to the unsolved case of Sharon Anettz. Even though he would never be held responsible, justice would always be associated with him and his deeds. On Sunday, September 15, 2019, two fishermen were engaged in their daily work near the aqueduct, the Neuquén Province's breakwaters in Argentina. The Lime River was approached by them on the same day. They remained composed until they witnessed something that was beyond their understanding. When the water floated the remains of a young girl's body, specifically limbs and a skull, frustrated, the fishermen contacted authorities who quickly arrived at the scene. Laura Lopez, a young girl from Plodio, was quickly recalled by officers, had been missing for less than 3 days. Her physical form was not familiar. The police were unsure of her identity and continued their search in the area to discover any indications of the victim's identity. In the same river, they came across a torn-up fabric bag, tights, and shoes undergarments. It was evident that the girl had been a victim of sexual assault, not just murder. Police contacted Laura's relatives after finding the clothing and inquired if they knew about it, would be able to spot it. The officers were unaware that the investigation would uncover the truth about the case. The method used to commit the crime was even more gruesome than what had been initially suspected. Plodio, Argentina, was the birthplace of Laura Lopez on November 11, 2000. Her elder sisters, Melissa and Damaris, who were 18 years old when she was born, loved her from the first day. Laura's mother passed away when she was only 3 years old, and all 3 siblings were left as orphans under the care of their father. Despite his initial efforts to provide for the family, the father eventually became addicted to alcoholism a few years later. Despite the challenges she faced, Laura was known for her sweet and loving nature. That's why her sister began referring to her as Cielo, a nickname that everyone who knew her would call her. She was referred to by her. The girl's father was laid off years later, necessitating them to find more work. At 18 years old, Cielo began vending fried pastries during the day. She went to high school in the evening, and during her free time from studying, she spent doing something else. Ensure the well-being of her nieces and nephews. At the onset of her schooling, she had aspirations of finding a good job to restore her financial stability. A sense of stability has been bestowed upon her family. Unluckily, something took place that prevented this from happening. Cielo and Damaris spent the entire day on September 12, 2019, drinking tea with each other. Damaris finished renovating the house. Her sister joked that she had never made tea like her before. Either way, it's a good thing. It was a pleasant day. Cielo later attended school, where her peers observed something sporadic about the routine. She chose to sit at the back of the class instead of her usual spot and left after 20 minutes, the conclusion of the lesson. A friend greeted Cielo as he returned home at approximately 11:30 p.m. They spent some time conversing, drinking a few drinks and taking selfies for social media. At 3 a.m., they said their goodbyes and Cielo admitted to feeling tired but having a plan for the future, to go to sleep. A message was sent by Melissa to Lisa the next day, inquiring if she had sought medical attention for her ear issues. She was unresponsive, anxious. Melissa contacted Damaris to inquire about Cielo's presence, which led to concern, the sisters of Cielo. She was nowhere to be found and her phone was switched off. They contacted the police as they found no evidence of her presence for several hours. They were informed at the police station that they had to wait for 48 hours from the last news item. Cielo was last seen by them before they filed a missing person report. The officers speculated that she might have had a boyfriend, as it was believed to be common. Adolescents encountering a situation. Saturday was characterized by the absence of life to Cielo. The report was only accepted by the police at that point, leading to a search. Sadly, it was already too late. The Lemay River's breakwater area was the location where two fishermen were working on Sunday the 15th. Plodio is just 15 kilometers away from where Cielo calls home. They remained composed until they encountered something that caught their attention. A young girl's body, including limbs and a skull, was said to be found floating in the water. They promptly informed the authorities about this. Upon arrival, the officers observed that the brutality had been extinguished with great force. The body is the subject of discussion. It was apparent that the person in question had a thorough understanding of knives. The search for clues in the area was ongoing, with detectives still searching for any leads. The individual affected, A fabric bag, leggings, and underwear were discovered in the same river, but completely destroyed. They came across 2 rings while conducting their search. Finally, officers searched the riverbed and found a blood-stained knife. Cielo's family was soon referred to by them. Damaris spotted the attire upon her arrival at the location, and without hesitation, she took action. Without hesitation, she confirmed that it was her sister's property. The fishermen discovered Laura Lopez's limbs and skull in the shallow waters downstream from where they accidentally found her. The discovery of a young woman's body in Lemay River was made by firefighters around 11:30 on Monday. It had already been entrusted to the Forensic Expert Corps for examination. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Carlos Scordillo. He ascertained that the death was caused by a severe blow to the head, leading to internal bleeding, a throbbing of the brain. A blow to the back of her head caused her to become unconscious. Cielo endured 2 to 4 hours of agony. She could have survived if she had been treated properly. Furthermore, her arms were found to have bruises, indicating that she had been beaten and had some facial trauma. Struggled her way towards the attacker. Cielo's sister's fears were validated by the forensic expert. The discovery of intimate wounds on her body was a clear indication of sexual assault. He also said that the recognizable marks of cuts on her neck, arms, and legs mentioned that the culprit had a history of approaching on kitchen knives. The assailant's lack of medical or anatomical knowledge was emphasized, which further intensified the problem. The roster of suspects. The detectives were unaware of the individual accountable for this terrible crime. After 3:00 a.m. on Friday, they analyzed Cielo's mobile phone and discovered that it was lost. Her contact had been with a man named Alfredo Emilio Escobar, a mechanic by profession, was 28 years old. He and Cielo were both students in high school, and he had a passion for hunting and fishing, inspiringly enabling him to wield a knife. The distance between the girl's home and his house was 2.5 kilometers and/or 20 blocks, which made it convenient. The reception of signals from the antennas is potent. The girl was contacted by this person 4 times on September 13th at 3:16, 3:22, and 3:36 a.m. The man. At that point, the antennas established that they were both at home. Then both mobiles were activated in the vicinity of the girl's abode. The phone of Cielo headed towards the city center and arrived at Escobar's residence by 5 a.m. The girl's WhatsApp story featured an alien emoji and her phone was still being tracked down. The man's dwelling was where I found him. At 5:52 a.m., the girl's mobile phone ceased to function. There was no communication from her thereafter. The records also indicated that Escobar had not re-entered his cell phone until 11:05 p.m. the following day. A day that, in China Muerta, where Cielo was hiding, the antenna of a nearby telephone pole detected the phone during this time. Subsequently, the remains were uncovered. Escobar came back home at 12:05 p.m. on September 15th. The video was captured by 13 cameras, which cover both city cameras and private residences. The stores were also examined. 2 individuals whose names were revealed were shown in specific recordings from the early morning of September 13th. The physical features were reminiscent of those of Cielo and Escobar. The young girl's mobile phone was in a state of mobility at the same time. Escobar was the only suspect in this case without a doubt. This man was recognized by one of the agents during the investigation. He reminisced about encountering him on Highway 22 a year ago, which was the way they were crossing to meet up with their families, the towns of Nuquain and Plody. A patrol car was hit by a young man who had been driving at velocities of over 80 kilometers per hour. The hour is a crucial one. He refused to be arrested, and a lawsuit was brought against him. Escobar was on the brink of going to court for that incident, but now the charges were completely different. The situation is distinct and has a greater gravity. At 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, a police patrol was present at the scene, which was roughly 30 meters away from Escobar's residence, had been working diligently. A young man who looked like the suspect was spotted driving away from a Fiat Ducato minibus that they had observed, exited. He was immediately recognized by the police based on his physical attributes, including his face shape, facial features, and hairstyle. He entered the house and later emerged with two adults around 60 years old. The trio got into a vehicle heading towards Highway 22 without any suspicion. Police chased the vehicle for a while and found it stopped in an area of nowhere. The zone is situated roughly 30 meters away from a bridge that connects New Cane and Cipolletti. The elderly man and Escobar exited the vehicle simultaneously. The police proceeded to ask for identification. Escobar was accompanied by his father and another man while his mother was in the car. It was evident that they were attempting to escape the city. The young man did not hesitate to undergo the procedure, but was visibly anxious. Shortly after, Escobar was brought to the police station and his vehicle was seized. Following that, he was subjected to a medical examination. The examination revealed swollen areas on the knuckles of his right hand's fingers, consistent with the use of a punching hand. He sustained cuts and bruises on the palm of his right hand. Cielo's death occurred on the same day as a few days before. These findings led to Escobar being charged with the rape and murder of the girl. Despite his request to remain silent, he was detained in custody for 6 months. There was a fear that he might escape or interfere with the investigation. On September 1st, the first search warrant was issued at the Estrada Street residence, the location where the Escobar family made their home. The property was sizable, incorporating a construction site and 2 buildings in the back. Upon entering the sleeping area where Escobar was present, officers discovered fingerprints on the walls. The use of luminol to check them resulted in the discovery of bloodstains. A cloth stained with blood was also found by officers during the search. The situation worsened as they walked to the building that was behind the residence. Crumpled vegetation was found to have blood spots. Blood was also present on the gates, the right handle of a cart, and on one end of an infrared emitting device. A device. It was in this place that the blow that caused Cielo's death occurred, as could be seen. The search team found blood stains at the location and then examined samples for comparison. The blood of the girl in Escobar was present. The fluid found on Cielo's body was also examined through DNA analysis. The lawyer representing Escobar stated that rape charges should not be brought up until the outcome is determined. We were seized. Nonetheless, the outcomes were achieved in a short time frame. The Ministry of Health Central Laboratory scrutinized the samples collected during the outbreak. The victim and accused genetic profiles are matched in the search. At the time of his arrest, Escobar was wearing sneakers and a knife was discovered at the river's bottom. They were also examined. Cielo was found to have DNA matching on both items. The victim's genital area was examined using 3 swabs. Escobar's DNA was compatible with one of them. As a result, investigators could already be certain that this individual had sexually assaulted the victim. The girl was killed, dismembered, and disposed of the corpse. The confirmation was made by law enforcement officials during a press conference on September 21st. Prosecutor Juan Agustin Garcia said he believed Escobar was guilty of the crime. He accused Cielo of murdering him to cover up his rape and stated that he could be prosecuted in the event of a guilty verdict, could be sentenced to life in prison. Similar to this, more evidence was still required. Technology played a significant role in Escobar's discovery, even though he did not plead guilty. The court ordered the seizure of his mobile phone, and he was required to furnish the access code. Scrutiny. Despite having Cielo as one of his contacts, it was discovered that he had removed her from the conversation on the night, the disappearance of her. The victim's call history was deleted by him, but their social security number was not removed. Dialogues with the media, the suspect's actions on September 11th, 12, and 13 were also revealed during the investigation. Visited the social media site to check out pictures shared by Cielo. Escobar maintained his innocence despite the evidence against him. Nevertheless, the evidence indicated that he was accountable for the murder. Ultimately, a conclusion was reached concerning the events that transpired on the night of the crime. On September 12, 2019, Cielo departed from school at approximately 8 p.m. After spending time with a friend, she stated that she was tired and would go to sleep. Sleeping is the purpose of this. She was contacted by Escobar at 3:40 in the morning, and they started a conversation. She and Kim were not friends, but she agreed to meet him, and they went back to his house. The events that occurred inside the house remained unanswered. Nonetheless, the research indicates that Cielo refrained from having personal encounters with Escobar. In a fit of rage, he sexually assaulted her. He took his own life out of fear that she might report him to the authorities. He escorted her to the backyard, hitting her on the head twice. Cielo was alive at that point, and Escobar acted cruelly by hiding her body for several hours. In order to avoid being caught unawares, he also shut down his phone. Cielo's body had been lying in the shed for almost a day, and she passed away due to the injuries. The body was dismembered with a sharp knife that Escobar had hidden in his kitchen. He loaded the body parts into his Fiat Ducato minibus and drove for 15 kilometers to reach his destination, the area where the breakwaters are located. He came back to the location and turned on his phone, feeling relieved and contemplating. The conclusion was reached. This case has become a public concern for the entire city. Nukin has strongly denounced the accused. The statement made by Escobar's younger sister, who is 23 years old, was the most powerful. She posted a message on her social media profile that addressed both her brother and the victim. The publication was met with a range of responses. Some people sympathized with her situation, while others accused her of complicity. In the midst of these assaults, they requested that Cielo and her team remain attentive. Her family is a part of it. Melissa subsequently got in touch with Escobar's sister, expressed her gratitude for the message, and requested an explanation. It's time for people to cease attacking the girl since she has no history of harm. The criminal case was immediately pursued by the prosecution. The initial court proceedings were conducted in the Provincial Legislative Assembly. According to the Nukin prosecutor, Escobar was fully responsible for his actions. The girl was allegedly killed through gender-based violence, in addition to other charges, the act of rape. In the same hearing, professionals who were involved in the examination of the attire discovered in that case. The river, in conjunction with the remains and evidence found in the man's house, provided their testimony. Testimonies. Florencia, Cielo's closest friend, was the most unexpected. She stated that Escobar had been sending messages to the victim for several months, inviting her to join him, to socialize and enjoy a drink. Despite this, they had never met before. She stated that she had been acquainted with him for 5 years and was aware that he didn't have it, a highly commendable standing. Parties at Escobar's house had been a regular occurrence over the years. The house was strewn with alcohol and psychoactive substances. Intimate liaisons were openly shared by couples. According to Florencia, she had advised her friend against dating Escobar on multiple occasions. The girl consistently replied with a refusal to respond and an inability to reply to his messages. The defense questioned why she had not suggested blocking Escobar's number. In response, Florencia stated that her friend had made the decision and she didn't want to dictate anything. Her life. They exhibited the girl's surveillance camera footage while she was on the stand, the day that Cielo went missing. They exhibited her a recording from IR at 4 a.m., which showed 2 individuals standing on opposite sides of the screen, individuals heading towards the central district of the city. Florencia reluctantly acknowledged that it was Cielo. She affirmed that her sneakers, jacket, and walking style were unmistakable. The girl also recognized Escobar. The testimony of Escobar's friend exposed his impulsiveness, as the judge accused him of infidelity. His behavior was marked by substance abuse and womanizing tendencies. His ex-partner was also present in court. According to her, their relationship ended in a negative way many years ago. She reported him to the authorities as she believed he had burglarized her home and stolen money. When she reached out to him to ask for the money back, he ran after her friend who was with her. The defendant attempted to defend himself after examining the testimonies. Escobar pointed to his friend, who sold him illegal substances, as the actual offender. The offense committed. That night, I was in a state of unconsciousness. My admission is that I have committed the act of removing blood and discarding it. He stated to the local media that he had not committed murder. According to him, he was intoxicated that evening, and this individual was also under the influence of drugs in his residence with Cielo. After hearing a scream from one of the rooms, Escobar immediately went to investigate what had taken place. The blood was visible and he proceeded to clean it up. He aided his friend in disguising the body. He expressed gratitude towards them for allowing him to share his supposed story at the end. The truth is what matters most. Despite the lack of evidence, this statement was not validated. Escobar was the lone suspect. He stated in his closing argument that this man exploited the fact that they betrayed the victim's trust by being somewhat familiar with her. He orchestrated the cruelness of his behavior and the gruesome method of disposing of the remains. Alfredo Emilio Escobar received a unanimous verdict after the jury deliberated for only 40 minutes, convicted of raping and murdering Laura Lopez, aged 18. The charge that the latter one was brought up was made worse because it was aimed at hiding the attack. The issue of gender violence was a part of it. Due to these reasons, he was given a life sentence with no chance of release. The Cielo Lopez law, which was passed by the Neuquén provincial government, has been in effect since then. Strive to eradicate violence against women. All ages, including students and teachers, are required to receive training on gender violence. Fortunately, he was not forgotten, and a life sentence is reassuring. The victim cannot be brought back to life by involving society and the family, as per Marcelo Henriques, the family's lawyer in Velasco. Karen Moore, a 52-year-old Caucasian woman from Davie, Florida, left her home at 7 p.m. on June 26, 2001, the day before her birthday, and she would never come back. Christina, her 8-year-old daughter, would return from summer camp the following day in honor of her mother's birthday, but her mother would not be there to welcome her home. Where might Karen have gone to? Was there any criminal activity surrounding her disappearance? Will she ever return? Christina had been looking for answers to these questions for 22 long years until now. Davie, a cozy suburban community in Florida's Broward County, offers the warmth of a close-knit neighborhood and the vitality of Western-themed attractions. Both tourists and locals find the city's year-round sunshine, mild weather, and the close proximity to beaches to be attractive features. Due to Davie's position as the center of several university campuses, it is well known for housing college students. Davie offers an abundance of recreational opportunities, high-quality education, and friendly neighborhood living. It is in this beautiful city that our case starts today. On June 27, 1948, Thomas Stewart Moore and Olga Charlotte Moore welcomed a daughter into the world. Karen Elizabeth Moore was the name they gave her. She had a sister named Pam as well. Growing up, Karen loved playing the piano, sailing, hiking, and cooking. Since she was a young girl, Karen has had a strong interest in travel. Nobody would have imagined that one day she would leave and never return. She earned her associate's in art degree in 1968 and her bachelor's in science with a nursing major in 1979. 53 years old Karen Elizabeth Moore and her husband were divorcing in 2001. She had a restraining order against him. Christina was their 8-year-old daughter, and Karen was granted full custody of her. Prior to her disappearance, Karen worked as a nurse at the Boca Raton retirement community, Edge Point Estates. And despite working full-time, she never wavered in her commitment to giving Christina a good upbringing. She made certain Christina had the most enjoyable years of her life. Christina recalls Karen as a loving mother as well, even though she worked as a nurse. Karen made out time to spend with Christina by taking her to the zoo and engaging in other activities. She simply wanted to give her daughter a happy and healthy childhood. However, the happy picture of this family would soon change into a sad one that was full of unanswered questions. On June 27, 2001, Karen was to turn 53 years old. To celebrate with her mother, Christina returned from her Girl Scout camp, but Karen wasn't home to welcome her. When Karen failed to pick her up, Christina knew that something was wrong. Karen was a nurse, so it was conceivable that she was preoccupied at the office. However, Karen was always available for her daughter and would have sent someone else to pick up Christina if she had to go to work. It was a very strange situation. The story that followed grew eerier by the hour as the day passed by. Around 6:30 p.m. on June 26, 2001, Karen paid her neighbor's son to mow her lawn, and that was the last time anyone had seen her. Around 7 o'clock in the evening, she left the house in her white 1999 Saturn. Nobody knew why she had stepped outside or where she might have gone. After waiting for hours and she still failed to show up at the house, Pam Kleiss, Karen's sister, called the police. Pam revealed that on the day Karen vanished, she had asked her ex-husband to pick up Christina from camp before she left for work. She then later had a quick conversation with her neighbor's son before leaving the house. Nobody knows what happened after these incidents. The following day, she had a job to report for. Keith Kreidel, the executive director at Edgepoint Estates, the retirement community where Karen worked, mentioned Karen's 8 years of reliable and responsible work history. Because Karen cared so deeply about her work, if there was ever an urgent task, she would have notified the establishment. Everyone, including her, was aware of how much Christina meant to her. There was no question that Karen did not leave on her own accord. Was this merely a distressing accident, or was there another factor at work here? The search for Karen Moore was hampered by the police's limited resources and growing suspicions. Tracking her car was the first thing they needed to do. Karen was driving a white 1999 Saturn four-door with a license plate due to CHU when she mysteriously vanished. On the back of her car was a sticker for Indiana State University. Every detail of this information was made available to the public. A woman soon reported seeing the same car in South Miami-Dade County. According to a tip given to Davie Police Department Detective James Franquiz, but the information was unconfirmed and unsupported by any other witnesses. In a last-ditch effort to move the case along, the police published a missing poster that described Karen's appearance. She was depicted on the posters as having brown hair, brown eyes, and glasses. She was described as being 5 feet, 4 inches tall. The police were searching for leads to find Karen's whereabouts but were having no luck. Her home's initial inspection was a sufficient indicator of bad news. Her entire wardrobe, luggage, and even her phone were discovered at home. A closer inspection of her home revealed no indications of trespassing or forced entry. The detective surmised that Karen must have left the house voluntarily, but it was still unclear why she had left. Detective James Franquiz informed the public that Karen Moo's phone and financial records were being investigated by the police. He immediately ruled out theft or robbery when her bank account and credit card showed no activity. This implied that Karen was in a terrible situation. Since she still had all her necessities at home, she would have needed money to support herself right. The police were asked by Karen's family to use a helicopter to look for her, but they were unable to do so because they were in shoe of Karen's possible route. Karen Moore had completely disappeared without a trace. Despite the Moore family and the entire police department posting missing person posters with rewards, days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months and months turned into years as Karen's family waited for her to return. Years and years passed, but Karen never came back. Although Christina, her daughter, got married and had kids of her own, Karen's fate from that day remained a mystery. On January 6, 2023, Mike Sullivan and Michael Rodriguez, who were leading the Sunshine State sonar team in searching the nearby water bodies in Broward County, were joined by Britton Lockhart, a scuba diver and the owner of the YouTube channel Depths of History. They discovered a car in a Davie retention pond with the aid of cutting-edge sonar technology. The entire team realized they had struck car wheels in the water when Michael saw his underwater sonar system start to light up. They searched for the car for about 15 minutes before finding it. Britton dove to inspect it and discovered an open trunk and a license plate buried beneath 3 feet of muck. Although they were confident that they had discovered something significant, they were unsure of its specifics and whether it was connected to any prior cases. The Davie Police Department was immediately contacted by Britton Lockhart. Karen's mysterious disappearance occurred 22 years ago, but Davie police hadn't forgotten about her. They had to send the divers back into the water when they got to the scene the following day. The car was extricated from the water and taken for additional inspection. The vehicle Karen was driving when she vanished matched the description of the car. Karen's COS license plate was discovered to be covered in dust. It was a significant finding in this 22-year-old case. The puzzle was beginning to come together. 2 bones were discovered inside the vehicle, and it was later determined that Karen Moore had been there when it crashed into the lake. They at last learned what had happened to Karen Moore. Even though the entire search mission was broadcast live on YouTube, Lockhart and Rodriguez were unable to discuss the specifics of the case. The search teams and even the Moore family were barred from giving interviews about the case because the police suspected foul play. Even though the whats, hows, and whys of her mother's disappearance have been a mystery for 22 years, Christina has now received closure on the matter. Karen mysteriously vanished, leaving Christina in the custody of her family. There could never be a replacement for the warmth and closeness she experienced with her mother. In her early years, she experienced frequent ups and downs. She even spent some time in foster care. She would miss her mother during these times and pray that she would be found or come back to her. Every life moment that every little girl hopes and dreams, to have their mother with them. My own birthdays, when I got engaged and married, now I have 2 kids. They didn't get to know their grandmother, Christina heartbreakingly said in an interview. Without a doubt, Christina and her mother had a close relationship. She posted on TikTok in 2021, even after all these years, lamenting how she wished she had had a little more time with her mother. Christina finally learned the fate about her mother after 22 long years. Although Christina was unable to find all the answers to the questions that had troubled her for years, she was nonetheless grateful to the police and search teams for allowing her to bring Karen back home and allow her to be laid to rest in peace. The investigation into Karen Moore's disappearance is still active and ongoing. Davie Police informed Fox News Digital via email that they had met with the detectives but were unable to comment further due to concerns that doing so might compromise the investigation's chances of success. The next round of pressing inquiries surfaced following the discovery of Karen's remains in the pond. What caused Karen to fall into the pond? What was the purpose of this crime? Assuming the police's suspicions are accurate, who was to blame for Christina and the Moore family's 22 years of suffering? There is still hope for Karen now that she has come home after 22 years. A partial success was achieved thanks to the police department's commitment and technological advancements in Sonos systems. Even though the answers currently seem hazy, Karen's justice could be right around the corner. Do not be afraid to speak up if you know anything. Your knowledge could be crucial to solving a long-standing mystery. Was Karen's death a result of an accident or something more nefarious? For the Hallback family, a reminder that nightmares can filter into reality. For Teresa Hallback, October 31st, 2005 was another day at the office. As a freelance photographer working for Auto Trader magazine at the time, she received a call to shoot a few photos at the Abray's Auto Salvage. She was never seen again. First reported as a missing person on November 3rd, 2005, a large-scale search began for Teresa. On the afternoon of November 5th, 2005, her Toyota RAV4 SUV was found partially concealed in Avery's salvage yard. Investigators later discovered blood in the vehicle. Charred bone fragments and teeth were also found in a burn pit on the same property. Her car keys were in the room of the property owner, Steven Avery. Born on March 22, 1980, Teresa was one of 5 siblings. Her parents, Richard and Karen, raised her on the family dairy farm. When she was 8 years old, her father sadly passed away. Karen eventually remarried Richard's brother Thomas, and together they raised their blended family. Teresa was an outdoorsy girl who aspired to work for National Geographic as a photojournalist. Friends described her as having an uncanny ability to make everyone feel welcomed. She was dedicated to her studies, making summa cum laude with a degree in photography. After graduating from the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, Teresa continued to work with Pierce Photography, whom she interned with during her college days. She started her own business, Photography by Teresa, and operated out of the Pierce studio. She traveled extensively, and to supplement her income, she took on freelance jobs for Auto Trader magazine, taking pictures of vehicles that were put up for sale. It was this job that led to her untimely death. All the evidence found pointed to one person, Steven Avery. Avery had contacted Teresa to set up an appointment to take pictures of his sister's minivan. According to records, she was last seen at 2:30 p.m. that afternoon. This was later confirmed by Steven's nephew, Bobby, who told police he saw the car enter the salvage yard. Avery was initially charged with a weapons violation as a convicted felon. On November 11, 2005, he was formally charged with the murder of Teresa, kidnapping, sexual assault, and mutilation of a corpse. The blood found in the SUV proved a positive match for Avery's. A set of car keys belonging to Teresa found in Avery's room. All the while, Avery maintained his innocence, alleging the police were trying to frame him. He was in the middle of a civil lawsuit with Manitowoc County for $36 million. Steven Avery, born on July 9, 1962, is a Manitowoc County native raised in Wisconsin alongside his two brothers, Charles and Earl, and sister Barbara by parents Dolores and Alan. He dropped out of high school with reports suggesting he had an IQ of 70. Steven was no stranger to the law. In 1981, he served 10 months in jail following the burglary of a bar. A year later, he pleaded guilty to animal cruelty after pouring gasoline on this pet cat and tossing it into a bonfire. For this, he served another 9 months. In 1985, he threatened his cousin Sharon Morris by forcing her off the road and thereafter pointing a gun at her. He later alleged that he wanted her to stop spreading rumors. She'd filed a report alleging that he exposed himself on several occasions and was meeting in the front yard. Although he received a 6-year sentence for his crime, he was granted bail and released. However, it was a case of mistaken identity that hadn't locked away for nearly 2 decades. Penny Bjornston reported that she'd been walking along a beach near Two Rivers when she was attacked and assaulted on July 29, 1985. Police believe the description she gave had a striking resemblance to Avery. She went on to choose his photo during an interview with police and later picked him out during a suspect lineup. He was arrested and charged with the attack on Bjornston. A state-appointed forensic official claimed that a hair frown on Avery's shirt was consistent with the victim's. This evidence led to his conviction in December 1985. All this despite a staggering 16 witness testimonies and a time-stamped receipt to prove his whereabouts at the time of the assault. Steven was convicted of rape and attempted murder and sentenced to 32 years in prison. Avery maintained his innocence and appealed in both 1987 and 1996. Both appeals were denied by the higher court. In 2001, though, Steven made contact with the Wisconsin Innocence Project. The organization took on the case, and in 2002, Steven was exonerated after DNA evidence proved he was innocent. It was later learned that another man, Gregory Allen, committed the crime and did, in fact, confess to it in 1995. Deputies allege that Sheriff Deputy Thomas Kokorek received a call and said, "We already have the right guy. Don't concern yourself with it." Allen and Steve bore a striking resemblance. Allen also committed a similar crime in the same area that Jensen was attacked and was under police surveillance, but he was not considered a suspect. Allen was not even called up as a suspect in the lie-up. After 18 years, Steven walked out a free man on September 11, 2003. He then went to file a civil lawsuit against former Sheriff Thomas Kokorek and former District Attorney Dennis Vogel to the tune of $36 million. His freedom wouldn't last long. When Teresa was reported missing, searches were conducted in the salvage yard. This was the place she had last been seen, as confirmed by Steven's nephew, Bobby Gassie. Steven claimed that he'd spoken to Teresa when she came by to take the photos, and then she left. Apart from the bone fragments, SUV, car keys, and blood found in the car, a bullet with Teresa's DNA was discovered in the garage. While incarcerated for Teresa's murder, Steven's lawsuit was settled in February 2006, and he was paid a mere $400,000. While in jail, Steven's younger nephew, Brendan Dassey, was also questioned in relation to the murder. Brendan, who was 16 years old at the time of the murder, was interrogated by police without parental supervision or a lawyer being present. Brendan confessed to investigators that he and Steven first assaulted Teresa before murdering her. They then burned her body to destroy evidence. "I go down to put it up aside, tear it up, pull it, cut it where? I'll just throw it." He was charged in March 2006 as an accessory to the murder. He later recanted his statement, claiming that he'd been coerced by detectives. Brendan was charged with the same crimes as Steven, although there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. Steven was convicted in March 2007 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Later that same year, Brendan too was found guilty and given a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 2048. But there was not to be a cut and dry solution to the murder. The conviction sparked controversy. It was a sensational case. Steven was the first of the Innocent Project's 174 insinuated convicts to be charged with a violent crime after being released. This caught the interest of aspiring filmmakers Laura Ricciardi and Moira Dimos. Making a Murderer premiered on Netflix in 2015 and created a media maelstrom. The documentary, which took 10 years to research and produce, profiled the case of Steven Avery. The series chronicles the case timeline, beginning with Steven's wrongful conviction in 1985 and subsequent exoneration, civil lawsuit against the men at Toa County, and the arrest of Steven and Brendan in regard to the murder of Teresa Halbach. It received both praise and criticism from critics and those directly involved with Teresa's case. The story, caused on an international level, has driven to division and public opinion. A petition to have Steven and Brendan pardoned was drawn up and sent to the White House. It garnered over 128,000 signatures, but still failed to make any impact. The White House stated, as the convictions were made in a state court, the president had no authority to pardon either defendant. There are those who firmly support the innocence of Steven and Brendan. These include his immediate family, who have supported him and also pray for the real killer of Teresa to be found. Sandy Greenman, Steven's ex-fiancée, is one such person. Greenman has been his avid supporter, going as far as to start a Facebook page to garner support and give exposure to the case. She described him as a model inmate. Greenman stated that people take a perverse pleasure in tainting Steven's name. People like to say Steven Avery has been violent all his life, which is not true, she said. Most notably, though, was the support offered by Kim Kardashian. The socialite has been using her influence to advocate for a fair justice system. Having come across the case on the social media site, her interest was piqued. Although she's made appeals to the governor, even her level of influence has no sway. However, she hasn't given up and hopes to seek justice for both Steven and Brendan. The other half feels Steven is where he belongs. On that side of the coin is Jody Stachowski, another ex-fiancée. Jody initially pledged her support in Steven's innocence during the documentary. Afterwards, she alleged that she had lied and it was all an act. Jody went on to explain to Nancy Grayson in an interview that he threatened to kill her and her family. He alleged that he wanted revenge on all women after his life was wrongfully stolen from him. Steven is the one person I can't trust. He's a monster, she said. The show also ignited a debate regarding the perspective covered by the documentary. For the supporters of Steven and Brendan, they feel the points most significant to the trial were highlighted. Dean Strang, one of Steven's attorneys, agreed that the documentary covered enough to give the public a chance to judge for themselves. He disagreed that the series was subjective. As for the relatives of Teresa, they say the show saddened them. The Halbachs stated the show sought to entertain and seek profit from their loss. Teresa's aunt, Kaye Mandatti, and cousin-in-law, Jeremy Fournier, both stated that the show was one-sided. Former Calumet County District Attorney Ken Krantz alleges he was not given a chance to tell his side of the story. The filmmakers denied this and claim that he refused to give an interview. In an interview with People magazine, Krantz alleges the documentary has left out key pieces of evidence. These include Steven using a fake name when calling Teresa. DNA belonging to Steven was found on the SUV's hood latch, and a ballistics report showed that the bullet found in the garage was fired from a rifle owned by Steven. Krantz further alleges that prior to her murder, Teresa had once before made a trip to the Avery residence. When Steven answered the door with only a towel on, she said she wouldn't go back because she was scared of him. In response to criticism from Krantz and other officials, the filmmakers said they'd given prosecutors the opportunity to answer questions. They believed that the documentary was a fair representation of the case and covered the most consequential evidence given during the trial. The documentary had its desired effect. It poked holes into the narrative of Steven Brendan's case by exposing allegations of police and prosecutorial misconduct evidence tampering, and witness coercion. At the outset, Steven called out the police for trying to frame him. This to avoid the county paying out the $36 million lawsuit he filed. Steven believed his lawsuit would be undermined if he was convicted of another violent crime. To avoid a conflict of interest, Manitowoc County gave neighboring Calumet County authority over the handling of the case. Part of the deal, however, was that Calumet could use resources which included personnel from Manitowoc. The key in Steven's room was found by a Manitowoc sheriff's deputy after several searches of the property. Another allegation made was regarding the blood evidence found in the car. Steven and his defense team believe it was blood used from his prior conviction. Given credence to this scenario were the claims made by the defense. According to the Avery defense team, the vial containing Steven's blood had been tapered with and a puncture hole was visible on the stopper. The prosecution combated this claim by testing the blood for a preservative not found in fresh human blood and found none. Avery's defense team brought in an expert witness who stated it was not possible to tell if the negative result meant there was none of the preservative present or the typology to test itself was inconclusive. The documentary shone a spotlight on the men who have interrogation with regard to Brendan Dassey. Dassey was just 16 years old during the interrogation. Firstly, he was interviewed without the supervision of a lawyer or parent. It's understood that both he and his mother consented to the interrogation. But what piqued the interest of many was that Brendan had an IQ of 73, classifying him as intellectually challenged. Many have argued that his intellectual disability left him open to suggestion, particularly when it was shown that the re-technique of interrogation was used. The re-technique has been criticized for producing high rates of false confessions, especially from juveniles and the mentally impaired. The technique is used to make the suspect comfortable and eventually confess to crimes through familiarity with the interrogators. The interrogator then proceeds to tell the suspect that the evidence shows that the suspect did commit the crime. Dassey allegedly agrees with the interrogators during the interviews, but later recanted at his confession. He accused his first defense team of collaborating with the prosecution to get him to confess. He's also claimed the coercion was used to elicit a confession from them. Both Steven and Brendan have appealed their convictions, but have been denied innumerable times and remain in prison. The defense teams of both men have exhausted their efforts in trying to get retrials on both men's charges. Following the making a murder documentary and the public outcry regarding Steven and Brendan's innocence, significant new developments have occurred in both their legal teams. Professors Lauren I. Ryder and Stephen Dryson of the Northwestern University Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth are representing Brendan. They too began with numerous appeals and have come up against many hurdles, but have refused to give up just yet. Meanwhile, Steven's appointment of Kathleen Zellner has shaken up the case and given further hits to the prosecution's claims. His previous lawyers, Deems Trang and Jerry Buting, have taken their newfound fame and gone on tour to promote and bring attention to the case of Steven Avery. Zellner, considered a trailblazing trial lawyer, has been responsible for overturning 19 wrongful convictions. Her dogged determination and careful analysis of cases has seen her uncover missing evidence that helped exonerate her clients. Most recently notable, she was a consultant for Johnny Depp and his defense team during his trial. Zellner hit the ground running when she was appointed to Steven's defense team and firmly believes her client is innocent. One of the first things she put to rest was the alleged confession of Joseph Evans Jr. Evans alleged he was responsible for killing Teresa and trying to frame Steven. Zellner stated that it was a not-so-subtle attempt at publicity. Previously, Evans played snitch and allegedly wrote a 9-page letter to media outlets, claiming he heard Steven confess to the murder. This time, though, it seems he wanted in on a portion of reward money to make his life in prison more comfortable. However, his claim is not gaining the traction he expected. In August 2016, Zellner filed a motion demanding new scientific testing be done. Willing to pay for the extensive testing, Zellner intended to use this evidence to prove that Steven had been framed. The theory was that 3 different burn pits showed evidence of human remains being burned. A particularly significant find was thought of a human pelvic bone fragment, a bone that was given to the Hull box as part of Teresa's remains. This action, claims Zellner, was proof that Teresa's remains were planted in Steven's burrowing pit. The defense, however, didn't get the opportunity to test these bones as they were not disclosed to them. This was a Brady violation according to Zellner, meaning that evidence which could have helped exonerate Steven was not disclosed in the proper manner with regards to the criminal case. Crucial evidence was just out of their reach. Zellner remained relentless in her pursuit for justice. She approached the case with a new angle, one that could potentially point to a new suspect in the case. Being unable to test the bone fragments, Zellner opted for forensic testing of the Dassey family computer. What she found on it was damning. Pornographic images of women in various stages of torture, violent images and videos depicting women as victims. All these images were allegedly accessed at times when Bobby Dassey was at home. Furthermore, Zellner pointed out that Barbara, Bobby, and Brendan's mother, along with Steven's sister and her husband, Stott Tadich, were trying to get rid of evidence that could implicate Bobby. The forensic team were able to download 2,449 pages of data from the computer to a CD-ROM to present as part of the motion for a retrial. On it were all the searches, videos, and photos accessed by Bobby. Bobby is the older brother of Brendan and the nephew of Steven. He was also the key eyewitness for the prosecution at Steven's trial. He alleged that he last saw Teresa going to his uncle's house, and when he returned from hunting that afternoon, did not see her or the car again. Added to these claims are the allegations of his half-brother, Brad Dassey. Brad is alleged to have said he believes his uncle is innocent. He also made claims that his stepmother, Barb, and Steven's brother-in-law, Scott, wiped the computer, deleting all pornographic material. Allegedly, Barb has filed a harassment suit against Brad, following a conversation they had about tracing deleted files from a computer, which some believe is, in part, to ensure Brad remains silent about his knowledge. For Bobby, though, the final nail in this coffin could be the evidence that exonerates Steven and, in turn, Brendan. An eyewitness has come forward claiming to have seen Bobby being assisted by a much older man pushing Teresa's SUV back into the salvage yard. Thomas Sawinski stated in a sworn affidavit that he drove by Bobby and the other man while en route to deliver newspapers. When he passed the duo a second time, Bobby allegedly stepped out in front of his car to stop him. Thomas swerved to avoid him and continued on his morning route. He said that Bobby's eyes showed he was not pleased to see him there. Following the discovery of the SUV, Thomas realized the significance of the find and contacted police. He told them everything he'd seen that morning, and their response was, "We already know who did it." He provided his details, but he'd never heard back from them. For Zellner, this provides a contradiction to the prosecution's key witness. If proven true, which she's confident about, Bobby's testimony would be false. Zellner believes the rejection of all the crucial evidence in favor of Steven denied him a fair chance to prove his innocence years ago. The newly filed motion is still with the appeals court and is awaiting an opinion or decision to be read over in November 2022. Steven Avery continues to maintain his innocence. Kathleen Zellner, in her own words, says she represents the wrongfully convicted and added, "If you lie to her, she will find you out." Could Steven be the scapegoat to a bigger conspiracy? Is this all a conspiracy to discredit Steven's claim of improper police procedure, or was there a monster truly hiding within Steven all these years? 21 years old Ashley Parlier and her parents, Reese and Sherry Parlier, got into a fight on Sunday, June 12, 2005, and she angrily stormed out of their Battle Creek house. Ashley was still missing after a week, so her family filed a missing persons report. All searches for her whereabouts for more than 10 years were fruitless. It wasn't until years later that her family and the police finally received the information they had been frantically looking for. What possible places could Ashley have gone? What ultimately allowed what had happened to her to be discovered? Stay with us as we reveal the mystery behind this cold case that finally became solved after 18 years. According to the 2020 census, Battle Creek, which is located in Michigan, has a population of over 50,000. The city has a variety of recreational areas and historic sites, which helps to create a tight-knit neighborhood where people get to know one another by name and take part in adventurous activities, despite its friendly and welcoming atmosphere. Battle Creek faces serious safety concerns because its violent crime rate is significantly higher than the national average. The community's distress over Ashley Parlier's disappearance in 2005 was worsened by this situation. A case that left the locals shaken and looking for explanations. Ashley Parlier was birthed into the world on October 16, 1983, to the joy of her parents, Russell and Sherry Parlier. She was the second child in the Parlier family. Her early years gave the impression of a young girl who was reserved. This was more a function of her inherent nature than a lack of enthusiasm for life. In fact, Ashley's older sister, Nicole, used to make jokes about how she had an unshakable faith in people. Ashley, who had dark brown eyes and a smile that revealed her slightly misaligned but utterly endearing teeth, tried to see the best in everyone. She really believed people were just as she imagined, good-hearted. Nicole recalled, despite having a mild mental disability that limited her cognitive functioning to that of a 12 to 14-year-old, Ashley never allowed that to decide her life. She had a strong and firm spirit. She obtained employment at the nearby Taco Bell after graduating from Battle Creek High School, which is situated in the busy block of Northeast Capitol. At that point, her aspirations of getting her very own car began to take shape with each paycheck. She withdrew a small portion of her earnings, daydreaming about the independence a car would provide. Nevertheless, despite Ashley's optimism and ambitions, life had other ideas. For someone as trusting and kind as Ashley, the world was sadly not prepared to return her kindness because the unexpected twists of fate lurked in the shadows. No one knew she was about to face a tragic end that would make her optimism for a better future dim. 21 years old Ashley Parlier had a slim build and weighed just under 100 pounds. She stood at 5 feet 9 inches. Even the smallest physical change was bound to be significant for someone of her stature. This was especially true for her adoring parents, who on the fateful day of June 12, 2005, noticed an odd bump on their daughter's body. Ashley's parents' first worries centered on her well-being because of her kind nature and exceptional mental capacity. The potential health repercussions added to their concerns, and they were eager to have her examined. They believed that prenatal care was crucial if Ashley were to be pregnant. Nobody, least of all Ashley, found the realization, the worries, or the discussions that followed easy. After a heated argument, the atmosphere in the Parlier home in Bedford Township's urban neighborhood grew more tense. Ashley was distraught and hastily left the family home. She didn't take a lot of things, but she did have about $700 in cash. She didn't have a car, a license, a phone, or a credit card, so this money was her only option. Initially, it was assumed that Ashley's departure was due to her needing a break some time to settle down, spend a day or two at a friend's house if possible. This hope was clunted by the Parlier family. However, a growing sense of dread crept over the Parlier family as the minutes turned into hours and the hours into days. The family's optimism slowly gave way to panic. Every missed call and every knock on the door that was in Ashley's troubled her family and made the once bustling house quiet. The Parlier family couldn't wait any longer as the days went by and their worst nightmares started to materialize into a terrifying reality. They decided to call the police and file a missing person report for Ashley after realizing something was seriously wrong. Their expectations are replaced by grief and anxiety. Detectives started looking into Ashley Parlier's mysterious disappearance right away. The evidence appears scanty at first, in the hopes that someone had seen something or heard anything that could lead to her whereabouts. The public was shown a picture of Ashley wearing a checkered shirt with blue jeans and brown leather sandals. Although Ashley Parlier had a distinctive and memorable physical appearance, her emotional state before going missing was a major cause for concern. The case became more complicated as a result of her unplanned pregnancy, vulnerability as a result of her mental capacity, and the significant argument she had with her family just before she vanished. There were numerous reported sightings of Ashley coming from the Houghton Lake region, which seemed like a promising lead. Hopes for her safe return temporarily eased the family's desperation. This glimmer of hope, however, was fleeting, as each reported sighting proved to be a dead end, leaving the family and the detectives frustrated. The detectives then focused on Ashley's parents, Sherry and Russell Parlier, who were the people Ashley was closest to, particularly as a result of the delay in reporting her disappearance. Her parents came under suspicion. Russell willingly agreed to a polygraph test and passed. Sherry refused to, citing her health issues. Sherry was later reported to be displaying early signs of Huntington's disease. Ashley's sister, Nicole, emphasized how unusual Ashley's extended absence was and how out of character this behavior was for her. After the heated argument, the family had simply assumed she was cooling off at a friend's house and had been waiting for her to return home. This foolish assumption caused them to delay calling the police, complicating the investigation. As the detectives made attempts to contact Ashley's ex-boyfriend, who was thought to be the father of her unborn child but whose identity has not been made public, the web of suspicion grew. He was dating another woman at the time who was also carrying his child. Despite not being exonerated, there was no evidence linking him to her sudden disappearance. The investigators ran into numerous leads as they dug further. Some have speculations that Ashley might have had a fragile mental state. In an effort to find information that might offer some sense of closure, this prompted the police to search grimly for a body, but they turned up nothing. Another theory claimed that Ashley had been robbed, but that was disproven by the fact that nothing had changed regarding her social security number. The depressing reality set in as each day went by. Reluctantly, the detectives came to the conclusion that Ashley might have been the victim of murder. They believed she had passed away. Despite the best efforts of the Battle Creek Police Department, the case grew colder with each passing year. Numerous officers investigated Ashley's mystified disappearance over the course of 18 years. They had several persons of interest, but no hard evidence against any of them. So the case went cold again. In a shocking turn of events, the case was turned over to the Sheriff's Department in 2020 due to rumors that Ashley may have been murdered outside of Battle Creek City. The mysteries appeared to be at a standstill until 2021, when an unexpected development rekindled the case's hopes of being solved. But as the years passed, the light of hope faded. The once hot case soon became a frozen mystery because the trail of leads had grown stale. The leads had almost completely disappeared despite the investigators' best efforts, leaving them in a chilly state of uncertainty. The investigation into the disappearance of Ashley Parlier had once more produced no fresh leads, no conclusive proof, and a plethora of unanswered questions. Every so often, a sudden jolt of unexpected information can rekindle hopes of solving a protracted mystery in the complex web of cold cases. That opportunity presented itself in the Ashley Parlier case from an unexpected source. When they got a call from Pennsylvania law enforcement, Calhoun County officers were surprised. It happened that detectives from Pennsylvania were interrogating 44-year-old Harold David Hallman III in January 2021. Harold was not just any suspect. He was suspected of being a serial killer. The investigators working on Ashley's case were immediately interested in this revelation. They wondered what information about Ashley's disappearance could possibly be revealed by questioning such a notorious felon. It's possible that the name Harold David Hallman III doesn't immediately come to mind, but he has a dark past. Harold, who was born on November 29, 1978, spent some of his teenage years living with his father in Germany. However, young Harold opted to remain in Germany with a girlfriend as his father relocated to Turkey. Although from the outside he appeared to be just another young man. Looks can be deceiving. Harold committed his first known murder at the age of just 20. A 21-year-old Air Force colonel's son named Joseph Whitehurst was his victim. Whitehurst's body, which had been brutally attacked with a club, was found outside Ramstein Air Base. Harold admitted to killing him while in German custody for a different charge. He claimed it was self-defense. Harold was given a lenient 6-year sentence and a reform school because of his advanced age and a schizophrenia diagnosis. Harold later made his way back to the United States, where he settled near Battle Creek Lakeview and worked as a truck driver. He became involved in the tragic 2005 disappearance of Ashley Parlier around this time. Years later, a mother of two named Tiana Phillips disappeared on June 13, 2018. During Harold's interrogation 3 years later, he said he hadn't intended to kill Tiana Phillips. He merely felt the urge to murder. Another woman, Erica Schultz, comes next, in the year 2020. On December 6th, she disappeared. Her disappearance and murder was linked to Harold via phone records, and he casually compared her murder to a typical day at the park. When he was finally caught, he was injured along Pennsylvania railroad tracks. Harold saw his actions as sins requiring atonement. While in the hospital, he admitted to killing both Schultz and Phillips. Later, while he was in prison, he wrote a letter to his estranged wife, where he detailed his crime against Phillips. This was a devious attempt to demonstrate his devotion to his wife. Harold, interestingly, had a pattern. He would attack, making sure his victims were unconscious, and then leave their bodies in isolated places. His victims would vanish and sustain head injuries. He committed horrifying, organized crimes. The reasons behind Harold's sinister ideas and actions were marquee. He had sophisticated theories about how power works and was interested in learning more about serial killers. He thought that relationships have a clear power dynamic where one person is dominant and the other is submissive. When his wife failed to play the submissive role, he looked elsewhere for that dynamic. When questioned, Harold was able to recall all the specifics of his crimes. He was very familiar with them. He acknowledged that if he wasn't caught, he would kill once more. After identifying two of the victims, Deanna Phillips and Erica Schultz, whom he had killed, Pennsylvania detectives investigating the horrific crimes committed by 44-year-old serial killer Harold David Hallman III discovered another unexpected revelation about Ashley's case. During interrogation, Harold shocked the officers by requesting that the cases of Phillips, Schultz, and Parlier be combined. He hoped to avoid several trials. The detectives were taken aback by the mention of Ashley Parlier. They hadn't discussed her case during their conversation. Their initial confusion gave way to increased curiosity. Harold might be able to shed some light on Parlier's disappearance. When detectives pursued the Parlier angle further, they encountered a startling confession. Harold openly admitted that he was curious about murder. "I just wanted to see what it felt like," he said to the detectives. For him, there was no activity or substance that could compare to the feeling of ending someone else's life. He committed his violent acts as a result of his grisly curiosity. His words painted a picture of a mentally troubled person. The detectives immediately contacted the Calhoun County Police Department to inform them of the startling confession's discovery and to update them on the case's progress. The detectives investigating Parlier's case went to question Harold right away because their curiosity to learn more details from him had piqued. Their further inquiries verified Harold's connections to Ashley Parlier. Records showed that Harold lived in Battle Creek from 2002 to 2009, a time frame in which he communicated with the missing young girl. The police put together a chilling timeline after doing more investigations. Ashley had sought shelter with Harold in Emmett Township, Michigan, following a dispute at her home. She told him about her family's worries and her pregnancy. This visit, however, took a tragic turn. The two got into a heated argument, and he started attacking Ashley. He soon carried her away to the isolated Pennsylvania hills, which was a quiet area. He then took her life there. Although Harold's admission deepened the tragedy, it also brought about closure in some ways. He remembered throwing away his blood-stained clothing and leaving Ashley's remains in Newton Township's northern area. Harold provided more information about his friendship with Ashley Parlier while the questioning was still ongoing. His admission made it clear that they had first met at an event where her parents were also in attendance. This coincidental meeting resulted in a conversation between the two of them, opening the door for a closer relationship later on. He also described how things played out on that crucial day when Ashley argued with her parents. Ashley had contacted him, not because he had any preconceived plans, but rather because he appeared to be someone she had trusted when she went to see him. Ashley confided in Harold about the pressure from her parents to get a pregnancy test. Harold's admission that he was the father of Ashley's inborn child shocked the detectives. Anyways, after the news of a potential pregnancy from Ashley, the atmosphere became tense and the two had a confrontation on the evening of June 13, 2005. In the midst of their argument, Harold lost his cool. He struck Ashley uncontrollably, knocking her out. He then took her about 10 miles out of the town center to a remote place where he described as an overgrown field in Michigan. This isolated location, which had a nearby garage or possibly a deserted house, served as the setting for a depressing story. Harold recalled the unsettling atmosphere created by Ashley's motionless body in the back of the car and the quiet surroundings. The fact that there were no passing cars confirmed his impression that this was the perfect spot to put Ashley's life to an abrupt end. He recalled the incident, explaining how he took Ashley out of the car and, in a fit of rage, killed her to ensure she would never live on the earths again. After that, Harold left for his house and removed all of the evidence. Later, he dumped his bloody clothes at Meijer, a well-known American superstore where he was employed at the time. Uncomfortably, Harold continued to be involved in Ashley's case after that. He acknowledged returning to the location years later and finding Ashley's skeletal remains. His admission was followed by an apology to the Parlier family. He expressed regret for Ashley's murder in particular, saying it was the crime he regretted the most out of all the ones he had committed. The Ashley Parlier case involved police work that was nothing short of relentless. Despite the case's many difficulties, they persevered in their pursuit of information and led for almost 2 decades in an effort to return Ashley to her family. So, when Harold Holman's confession surfaced, authorities had reason for optimism. They asked him to specify the precise location where he had left Ashley's remains in order to verify his account. This wasn't just any other case for both the officers and the prosecutors. It was extremely demanding in terms of time and resources. Over the years, there have been a number of detectives involved in the investigation who have all been committed to learning what really happened to Ashley. Their search went well beyond the boundaries of the city when local leads dried up. They traveled all over the country, contacting potential witnesses and looking for any leads in diverse locations like California, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. Detective John Pignataro from the Calhoun County Sheriff's Department, Detective Dave Fominga, and Detective Sergeant Chris Suarez from the Michigan State Police made up the strong investigative team. Thanks to their combined efforts, they eventually arrived at a wooded area along a 6.5-mile road in Newton Township, just south of Battle Creek. On March 30th, 2022, there was a lot of searching going on. Almost 24 officers searched the area for hours in an effort to find Ashley, but they were unsuccessful. Locals mentioned that the landscape had drastically changed since Ashley's disappearance, which added another level of complexity. What was once a farmland had been divided up and sold over the years to different owners. Despite the focus of the search and the optimism expressed in Harold's confession, a significant obstacle materialized. Harold had trouble remembering the precise location where he had left Ashley after all these years. He struggled to locate the location because of the changes brought on by years of development in the area. The hunt for Ashley continues despite the absence of any remains. The police are still fully committed to solving this heartbreaking case, and they do so in the hopes that that day will come. Considering the degree of such investigations, Harold Holman's trial in connection with Parlier's case followed a fairly straightforward course. It's crucial to remember that Harold had already been found guilty of killing 2 other women by the time he went on trial. The proceedings were hampered by this dismal track record. Even with these prior convictions, it was surprising to hear Harold express a real fear of the death penalty. Prior to the trial, he had been detained at the Luzerne County Jail. He chose a wise legal course in February 2023 when he pleaded guilty to Ashley Parlier's second-degree murder. He entered the plea as part of a deal with the district attorney's office in Luzerne County. He had consented to help the Calhoun County authorities find Ashley's remains. In exchange, he would be spared the imminent threat of the death penalty. Both the defense and the prosecution presented their cases during the trial. The prosecution emphasized the seriousness of Harold's crimes, particularly in light of his prior convictions, while Harold's defense likely focused on his cooperation with the police and his plea agreement. The most anticipated testimony was Harold's own, so to speak. Even though no new testimonies were mentioned, his prior confession was carefully examined, and its significance was clear. The conclusion was inevitable. Harold, the man who had killed multiple people, would not be eligible for parole. Instead, he would serve 2 life sentences plus an additional life sentence. Even though Harold's legal journey appears to be coming to an end, Ashley's case still needs to be resolved. The Calhoun County Sheriff's Office is still looking for information that could lead to the discovery of Ashley's remains. One has urged to contact the Calhoun County Sheriff's Office directly at 269-781-0880 if they have any information about the case. They are still as committed as ever to getting the information they need. The family of Ashley Parlier was plagued by the case for almost 2 decades. Sherry and Russell, her parents, tragically passed away in 2020 without ever learning what had become of their daughter. Nicole, the sister of Ashley, was suffering more and more. She discovered that Ashley had been betrayed by Harold after she had sought refuge with him. Nicole's sorrow was evident. She bemoaned the fact that her parents weren't able to hear this, as she thought back on the tragedy and suspicion that surrounded her family 18 years ago. Nicole made friends with the sisters of the victims. They stood as one, sharing their common grief and concentrating on remembering their loved ones rather than the men who had taken them away. Nicole firmly stated in an interview, "We're going to remember how they were good people." The family now has closure, and even though they are still looking for Ashley's remains, they are also aware of the heartbreaking truth. What could have compelled Harold to carry out such a wicked deed, and how did he avoid capture for so long? Ardith Wood, a stunning 27-year-old, was not only beautiful, but also exceptionally intelligent. She was on the path to earning a doctoral degree in philosophy from Waterloo University while simultaneously working as an editor for a philosophy journal. Ardith's dream of becoming a professor was about to come true. The summer of 2003 arrived. Ardith decided to spend her vacation visiting her family in Ottawa, Canada. She had a wonderful time with her loved ones, going on walks together and cooking at home. On the morning of August 6th, the young woman went for a run. When she returned, her thoughtful parents were already waiting for her with a delicious breakfast dessert. It was a warm and sunny day, so Ardith decided to go for a bike ride. Her brother kindly allowed her to borrow his bicycle. The girl promised to be back in a couple of hours. That day, her mother planned to go shopping before lunch, awaiting her daughter's return from the ride. Ardith loved cycling along the picturesque route through the forest, past the river and cliffs. This trail was popular among local cyclists. It was always peaceful and safe here, but not this time. 27-year-old Ardith never came home. Her mother was worried about her, and then a heavy downpour started. The woman understood that her daughter wouldn't be riding in such weather, but time passed, and she still wasn't back. The family set out to search, assuming the girl might have fallen off her bike and needed help. Bike paths wound through the entire city, and they didn't know which direction Ardith had gone this time, so her relatives searched all over town. Their efforts were fruitless, and when it got dark, they went to the police. Due to the bad weather, the search was postponed until morning. The next day was no news about Ardith. One of the largest search operations in Ottawa's history began. It involved rescuers, police officers, dog handlers with their canines and helicopters. In total, about 1,000 people, including numerous volunteers. Ardith's family actively participated in the search, posting flyers with the girl's photo all around the city. But the first few days yielded no progress. The police turned to the public for help. Soon a call came from a local resident. She said that on the day of Ardith's disappearance, she was in the forest on the bike path and saw a creepy guy with a bicycle there. The witness described him as a young man with a pleasant appearance, well-dressed, but behaving extremely suspiciously. His conduct was frightening. It turned out the stranger had tried to push the girl off her bike and drag her into the bushes. Fortunately, other people appeared on the trail. The perpetrator fell behind and she managed to escape quickly. After this incident, she no longer felt safe on walks and stopped cycling alone. According to the girl, it happened in an area called Green Creek. She suggested that the stranger might have attacked Ardith as well. The eyewitness was invited to the police station to create a composite sketch. She described the suspect as a young man, 20-30 years old, light-skinned, dark-haired with a beard and glasses, pleasant-looking and athletically built. The sketch was shown to Ardith's family, but they didn't recognize anyone familiar to the missing woman. Many men wore similar glasses and beards at the time, so suspicion could fall on anyone. The investigators decided not to publish the portrait in the media, fearing a wave of false calls. The police constantly asked local residents for help, showing Ardith's photo. Law enforcement was confident. Such a bright, beautiful girl with a memorable appearance couldn't have gone unnoticed. Someone must have seen her and could provide a lead. This assumption proved true. 16-year-old Laura called the police. She said that on the day of the disappearance, while riding past on her bicycle, she saw Ardith on the bike trail. The missing woman was sitting on a rock, seemingly resting. When Laura rode further, she heard a scream. Turning around, the girl saw Ardith arguing with some guy. Laura didn't know what to think. Maybe it was just a lover's quarrel. Ardith wasn't calling for help. And then she went into the woods with that man. Laura wanted to find out what was happening, but got scared. Seeing the approaching storm, the 16-year-old witness hurried home. As she was leaving, she thought she heard someone screaming. The police invited Laura to the station to show her the composite sketch of the stranger. She recognized him. According to the girl, it all happened around 1 p.m. in the same place, Green Creek. Later, the police received several more calls from girls who had encountered this creepy guy on the trail. He attacked them, but the victims were lucky to escape. One woman's call particularly stood out. She recounted how an attractive stranger approached her during a walk. They had a pleasant conversation, but suddenly his behavior changed drastically. The men started grabbing her, but the woman managed to push the attacker away with her bicycle and quickly flee. She didn't even look back, afraid he would catch up. After returning home, the woman told her family about the incident and warned her loved ones to stay away from that place. Oddly, none of the girls who were attacked reported it to the police. The search for Ardith concentrated around the creek area. Soon, her bicycle was found, indicating the police were on the right track. Meanwhile, the investigators received another call that became a breakthrough in the case. A man, without giving his name, reported an unpleasant incident in the forest. Terrible accident. Allegedly, he didn't want to harm Ardith life. Confused, he decided to get rid of the body. The stranger carried the girl across the creek, dug a small pit and buried her there, covering the grave with branches. Then he hung up. The police managed to trace the call. It was made from a phone booth 20 minutes away from Ottawa. Law enforcement rushed there, hoping to find witnesses or lift fingerprints or DNA from the receiver. But disappointment awaited them. Someone had thoroughly wiped the handset. Neither eyewitnesses nor surveillance cameras could be found. The search for Ardith continued in Green Creek. Dogs trained to detect the smell of corpses arrived at the scene. Soon, the worst fears of the family and the police were confirmed. With the help of the dogs, they managed to find the missing woman's grave, located between two trees in a quiet, picturesque spot. Coming closer, the detectives saw the half-buried naked body of the girl. Likely, the criminal was startled by someone, which is why he buried the victim so sloppily. Criminologists started examining the crime scene, but unfortunately found no evidence. No fingerprints or DNA. The medical examiner confirmed it was Ardith Wood. She died a horrific, agonizing death that didn't resemble an accident at all, contrary to what the stranger said in his conversation with the police. The cause of death was drowning. Algae were found in her lungs, so the girl was still alive when she ended up in the water. Despite the body being found naked, the medical examiners didn't find unequivocal signs of rape, although they didn't rule it out. The police believed the crime was sexually motivated. In their opinion, the stranger hunted girls in a deserted place for this purpose. Otherwise, what else could have driven him? The detectives needed to catch the criminal urgently to avoid new victims. They were convinced he had attacked several girls and had already killed one. How far could the maniac go? The police decided to publish a composite sketch of the suspect in the media, asking the public for help in identifying him. Investigators received about 4,000 calls with leads and began processing them, which took a lot of time. On September 10th, the police released important information about the suspect. It turned out that the girls who saw the stranger in the forest had noticed one detail. He had an eagle tattoo on his left shoulder. This was a crucial lead that could help track down the criminal. The media published a sketch of the tattoo, after which several calls came to the police. People reported acquaintances with bird tattoos on their faces, necks, or backs. However, this information led nowhere. In April 2004, while processing another batch of calls, investigators came across an important clue. A man claimed he knew the killer. The person lived in the area and was riding a bicycle in the Green Creek vicinity of the time of the crime. The detectives were interested in this information and invited the specified suspect for a conversation. When the guy entered the police station, the investigators were amazed. He matched the criminal's description both in appearance and age. During the conversation, the young man was noticeably nervous. He said he often rode his bike along that trail, not understanding what the issue was. When the police asked him to show his shoulder, an eagle tattoo was found there. It turned out that the man had previously had problems with the law. He became the prime suspect. The interrogation lasted 3 hours. The entire time, the suspect answered questions defiantly and aggressively. He said about himself, "I'm like a scorpion under a rock. You never know what I'm going to do." The guy had no alibi, but couldn't say what he was doing on the day of Ardith's disappearance. However, he denied involvement in the girl's murder. There was insufficient evidence against him, so the suspect was released, but placed under surveillance. A few weeks later, he was invited for questioning again. The detectives had gathered a lot of information about him and carefully prepared their questions. They also suggested the young man take a polygraph test. The suspect agreed and easily passed all the tests. The police couldn't believe it but had to let him go. Got all suspicions. The investigation had reached a dead end. The Ottawa police announced a $50,000 reward for any information that would help solve the case. It was the largest amount law enforcement had ever offered under similar circumstances. Soon, about 5,000 calls with leads came in, which the police began to check. One portion of information mentioned the name Christopher Myers, which caught the investigators' attention. It turned out he had previous convictions for selling prohibited substances. Colleagues described 25-year-old Chris as a quiet, non-confrontational, and even inconspicuous guy who worked as a janitor. His face was remarkably similar to the composite sketch of the suspect. Moreover, he had the same beard. The police were delighted, thinking they had finally found the right man. But it turned out Christopher had an alibi for the day of Ardith's disappearance. The landlady of the apartment he was renting claimed that on August 6, 2003, the young man was at home in the morning and then went to work at a restaurant. This surprised the police because a year had already passed. How could the woman remember the details of that day so clearly? Another problem arose. Christopher didn't have an eagle tattoo on his shoulder. Although witnesses insisted they had seen this tattoo on him, maybe he had it removed. The detectives were convinced this was the person they needed and had to prove it. A few weeks later, another similar attack occurred. In the evening, a girl who closely resembled Ardith was walking alone across a bridge when she heard someone walking behind her. Turning around, she saw an attractive man on a bicycle. The girl had no intention of making acquaintances or talking and asked to be left alone. The man rode past her, and just as she sighed with relief, the stranger turned his bicycle around and rushed straight at her. There was no one around who could help. The attacker jumped off his bike and forcibly dragged the victim into the bushes. The girl screamed very loudly, which seemed to frighten the assailant. He fled. The victim went to the police. Other investigators took on this case. Everyone assumed it was an attempted robbery, and the detectives investigating Ardith's disappearance found out about the incident much later. In May, another attack occurred on a tall blonde woman similar to the missing person. The girl was returning late in the evening from a party when a stranger approached her and tried to strike up a conversation. She asked to be left alone. Then he started asking for help, claiming he was lost. The girl explained where he should go, and he left. She breathed a sigh of relief, but literally 10 minutes later, he attacked her from the bushes. The assailant furiously began strangling her, twisting her neck. At that moment, the girl thought it was the end, but she continued to resist, screaming, hitting him, biting. Her screams attracted the attention of the residents of the building, who came out to see what was happening. This frightened the criminal and he fled, but this time he made a serious mistake. In his haste, he dropped his phone. Investigators established that the mobile belonged to Christopher Myers, whom they suspected in the Odd Death murder case. The puzzle came together. Chris committed all the similar crimes. He chose girls with similar appearances, blondes, and attacked them. Christopher was brought in for questioning, but he wasn't in a hurry to confess to the murder. He said he had never been to Green Creek, had never seen Ardith, and wasn't involved in the other attacks. Chris complained about mental health issues and uncontrollable aggression, but insisted he hadn't caused physical harm to anyone. The detectives noticed he had crooked teeth and persuaded him to take a polygraph test. The test lasted 5 hours, and Chris failed it miserably. But despite this, he still continued to claim his innocence, saying the polygraph was wrong. Since the results of the lie detector test weren't considered evidence, the suspect had to be released. For the next 5 months, detectives gathered evidence against him, interrogating everyone who knew Christopher, relatives, friends, colleagues, and his ex-girlfriend. It turned out Christopher was born into a dysfunctional family of alcoholics. His difficult childhood was accompanied by the development of various mental disorders: attention deficit disorder and schizoid disorder. Chris was taken from his birth family and adopted by another couple. The adoptive parents treated the boy with love, but he was uncontrollable. They couldn't cope with raising the troubled child and returned him to the orphanage when Chris turned 12. As he grew older, he seemed to become an ordinary, normal guy. Christopher graduated from school, entered university, socialized with friends, and lived in a dormitory. But his roommate considered Chris abnormal. He told creepy stories that frightened her. Eventually, she kicked him out of the room. Chris's ex-girlfriend revealed that he loved cycling along the trails of Ottawa and was fascinated by the picturesque scenery. She also disclosed his main secret. Christopher enjoyed temporary tattoos. For a while, he had the exact image of an eagle on his shoulder. The girl was shown a sketch of the tattoo, and she confirmed that he had the same one on his left shoulder. Christopher was summoned for questioning on October 13, 2005. He was placed in a very cramped interrogation room. This time, the conversation was conducted by burly men who pushed their chairs right up against Chris. All this put tremendous psychological pressure on the suspect. The investigators started with simple words. "We know everything about you, Chris. We know it was you who killed Ardith." Christopher responded evasively. 3 hours later, he began to give testimony. Confused and inconsistent, Chris admitted that he was in Green Creek that day and met Ardith. Struck by her beauty, he decided to get acquainted. He started giving compliments, chatting nicely, and then invited the girl into the woods, and she agreed. Once there, Christopher began hugging and kissing her, showing the detectives exactly how. And then, according to him, it all ended. Ardith recoiled from him. Apparently, she didn't like his manners. She ran away but fell into the creek. Christopher tried to save the girl but failed. He wanted to portray himself as a hero, but this absolutely didn't correspond to his subsequent actions. For some reason, he pulled Ardith's body out of the water, undressed it, and buried it. When the policeman stated that Chris was going to be charged with murder, he immediately retracted his words. "No, I never met her. It was a joke. I took all the information from the newspapers." The detective had to have a serious one-on-one conversation with him. Eventually, Chris confessed to killing Ardith. He even drew a map with the trails in Green Creek where he met the girl. On it, he marked another person, Laura, who saw him with the victim in the forest. Laura recognized the suspect as the same man she had seen then. Christopher was arrested on October 20th, 2005. He agreed to go to the crime scene to recreate the events. But when they arrived at the indicated trail, Christopher suddenly declared that it wasn't the right location, claiming everything happened elsewhere, although everything matched. Christopher had an unstable psyche. He would give testimony and then retract his words. Later, he also confessed to other attacks on girls. He was charged with additional crimes for these offenses. At the trial, the lawyer stated that Christopher was just a troubled young man. At first, the accused denied his previous confessions. But later, on the advice of his defense attorney, he decided to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty. On January 8, 2008, 5 years after the murder, the defendant confessed to the crime but refused to disclose the motives and details. Later, he also admitted to the other attacks. The prosecution believed that on that day, Chris wasn't on the forest trail by chance. He was stalking his prey like a hunter. He attacked several girls who were lucky enough to escape. The likely motive was sexual assault. Ardith was unlucky that day. She was Christopher's type, an attractive blonde. He tried to get acquainted with her, but something went wrong and an argument broke out between them, which was overheard by a teenage girl riding by. Under some pretext, the killer managed to lure Ardith into the woods. There, he attacked her, started undressing her, intending to rape her. To save herself, the girl ran away and jumped into the creek. Chris rushed after her, caught up, and drowned her, then buried the body. The victim's parents agreed with the prosecution's version. According to them, Ardith was a good swimmer and couldn't have drowned in the creek. In their opinion, the defendant deliberately drowned the girl. However, it remained a mystery to them how Christopher managed to convince Ardith to go into the woods with him. As part of the deal with the investigation, Christopher pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a right to parole only after 10 years. In 2020, he filed a relevant petition, but the commission rejected it, recognizing the high risk of repeated crimes against women. In 2007, a plaque in memory of our death was installed on one of the centuries-old oaks in Green Creek Park. And in 2017, during a powerful thunderstorm, just like on the day of a murder, lightning struck the same tree. The oak suffered serious damage, and experts didn't believe it would survive. But a miracle happened. The mighty tree withstood. It still grows as a living monument to the girl who was killed nearby. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.